evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. For the past 14 months, you have heard two main things about the war in Ukraine. The first is that the war in Ukraine is a war of national sovereignty. It is not a proxy battle between superpowers. Russia invaded Ukraine. That was immoral. The United States supports Ukraine because the United States supports democracy. But the United States itself is not at war with Russia. This is Ukraine's war to fight. The second thing we have heard over and over again is that Ukraine is winning that war. Ukrainian troops are brave and noble. Russian troops are evil and incompetent. The Ukrainians are beating the Russians. In the end, their victory is inevitable. Now, you're very familiar with these points because you have heard them every day since last February. You've heard them repeated by every power center in the United States, the Pentagon, the White House, the leaders of both parties in Congress, CEOs, and celebrities. And most insistently of all, you've heard them from virtually every single outlet along the entire spectrum of our national news media. These are the two essential themes of the war in Ukraine, and both of them are lies. We know that they're lies because late last week, leaked intelligence about the war in Ukraine began to appear on social media. Briefing slides prepared by the U.S. government began to show up, among other places, on Twitter. And the slides show that this is in fact not Ukraine's war. It's our war. The United States is a direct combatant in a war against Russia. As we speak, American soldiers are fighting Russian soldiers. So this is not a regional conflict in Eastern Europe. This is a hot war between the two primary nuclear superpowers on Earth. And yet this war has never been formally declared. It has not been authorized by Congress. And for that reason, this war is a violation of American law. It is a crime. The second thing we learn from these slides is that despite direct U.S. involvement, Ukraine is in fact losing the war. 7 Ukrainians are being killed for every Russian. Ukrainian air defenses have been utterly degraded. Ukraine is losing. The Biden administration is perfectly aware of this. They're panicked about it, but they have lied about this fact to the public. Just 2 weeks ago, for example, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin told the U.S. Senate that Russian military power is, quote, waning. In other words, Russia is losing the war. That was a lie. He knew it was when he said it, but he repeated it in congressional testimony. That is a crime. But Lloyd Austin has not been arrested for committing that crime. Instead, the only man who has been taken into custody, or likely ever will be, is a 21-year-old Massachusetts Air National Guardsman who leaked the slides that showed that Lloyd Austin was lying. He revealed the crimes, therefore he's the criminal. That's how Washington works. Telling the truth is the only real sin. Now, our news media exist and have constitutional protection precisely in order to push back against this grotesque standard. Their only job is to tell the truth. And yet tonight, the news media are celebrating the capture of the kid who told Americans what's actually happening in Ukraine. They are treating him like Osama bin Laden, maybe a little worse, actually, because unlike Al-Qaeda, apparently this kid is a racist. Here's CNN.
The Washington Post, as you know, reviewed video of this suspect yelling racial and anti-Semitic slurs.
Is this a dangerous person? This air guardsman who's now been taken into custody had talked about being a gun enthusiast, had been at gun ranges. He's obviously a member of the military.
And he's the big guy in the scene. Somehow he has access to this kind of information, and that makes him even larger.
A person who thinks they know better than everyone else, they're smarter than everyone else in their view.
And that this is a 21-year-old man. He's described as a gun enthusiast. It feels like in some of these descriptions, somebody who's maybe hungry for power.
So this 21-year-old Air National Guardsman from Massachusetts is not a whistleblower, CNN explains, with the help of the many intelligence agency figures it has now hired as analysts. No, he's not a whistleblower. He's a criminal. Because he is, unlike the people who run our government, quote, hungry for power. And because this 21-year-old was so hungry for power, federal law enforcement had to swing into action with unfamiliar speed and efficiency and apprehend him. He was that threatening. Now, keep in mind, as of tonight, we still don't know where Jeffrey Epstein got hundreds of millions of dollars. We have no idea. Nor do we know what he did for a living. We don't know who left pipe bombs on Capitol Hill on January 6th, 2 of them. We don't know who leaked the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. We can't even say for certain who killed the President of the United States, because after 60 years, the Biden administration is still hiding thousands of pages of classified documents from the Kennedy assassination, just as they are hiding more than 1 billion other classified documents. But tonight, we can say for dead certain who embarrassed Toria Nuland and Joe Biden. And that kid is going to jail for a long, long time. That's the standard. The media are fine with that standard. Watch this remarkable exchange on Monday of this week between the White House press corps and Biden flack John Kirby.
Without confirming the validity of the documents, this is information that has no business in the public domain. It has no business, if you don't mind me saying, on the pages of front pages of newspapers or on television. It is not intended for public consumption, and it should not be out there.
So the fact that U.S. soldiers are fighting Russian soldiers in a war in Ukraine has no business in the public domain. The fact that the country we are backing and fighting alongside is losing, not winning, has no business in the public domain. You have no right to know what your government is doing in your name with your tax dollars and with the future of your children and grandchildren. You have no right to know. Shut up and stop asking relevant questions. Okay, said the media. And if you want to get really sick to your stomach, go pull a transcript from the Pentagon briefing today, where news reporters asked Flax from the Pentagon, what are we going to do to keep information like this secret in the future? Not one question about the substance of the information. We're fighting a war against Russia directly? Really? Don't they have the largest nuclear arsenal in the world? Not one question. How can we help you keep it secret? Those were the questions. And not only are the media covering up the substance of the story, which is not who leaked it, but what he leaked, they're covering up the crimes committed to get you this information. The administration apparently used illegal surveillance techniques to identify this kid, apparently with the help of the Washington Post and the New York Times, who are its accomplices. They're not holding government accountable. They're helping government keep you from knowing what government is doing. Today, the Washington Post reported it had exclusively obtained some of the classified documents this leaker possessed. Quote, the Post also reviewed approximately 300 photos of classified documents, most of which have not been made public. Some of the text documents the leaker is said to have written out. So we've got two problems here. If it's illegal to see these documents, if you don't have security clearance, how is the Washington Post doing this legally? They don't have a security clearance. Well, obviously they were given them by the U.S. intel agencies and are working alongside them. But the bigger problem is this is information that's relevant to the public in a so-called democracy. You can't lie about things that jeopardize our collective future and get away with it. And you certainly shouldn't be doing that with the assistance of the news media. The news media whose job it is to inform you of what your government is doing. But instead they are working actively late into the night to lie to you on behalf of their masters in permanent Washington. And by the way, just last week, the plan was to lie in an even more grotesque way and blame Russia for this. And we're quoting, Russia or pro-Russian elements are likely behind the leak of several classified U.S. military documents posted on social media that offer a partial month-old snapshot of the war in Ukraine, 3 U.S. officials told Reuters on Friday. Really? Who are these officials who lied to Reuters? And then Reuters just, of course, obediently reprinted their lies, as they always do. News agencies print what they are told to print by the intel agencies, no matter how ridiculous it is, no matter how much dignity and self-respect they exchange in return for doing it. So what's happening to this leaker now is what happens to anyone who contradicts the national security state and their obedient servants in the media. You go to prison so the media can continue to tell you lies. Here's MSNBC, for example, assuring its viewers that everything's just fine.
What the Russians didn't understand was that they were going into the lion's den. That kind of what we would say in the military, this force multiplier, made the Ukrainian army quite literally unbeatable. They are winning Russia is going to lose this war.
Every last person has said exactly what Malcolm just said. They're going to win this war. It's not a matter of if, but when.
14 months in, they are simultaneously telling you that Ukraine's victory is inevitable, mostly because of the moral power they possess, but at the same time, you need to send tens or hundreds of billions of dollars more in advanced weapons systems to Ukraine to keep them from losing. What will they say now that we know the truth and that we know that they lied to us, not just the U.S. government, but the U.S. news media? Glenn Greenwald has seen stories like this very, very up close and personal. He's the host of System Update on Rumble. He broke, of course, the most famous leaking story in American history, the story of Ed Snowden. He joins us tonight. Glenn, thanks so much for coming on. I should say, and I'll just be quiet and let you speak, since you know this better than anyone, but we left out a lot of details that are being reported in the Washington Post, the New York Times, etc. tonight about the leaker and where this all came from, because honestly, I don't believe anything, and it's very hard to know what's true. We're all being spun, we're all being lied to, and we just didn't want to repeat the lies. So with that, what do you make of this?
I can't think of an incident, Tucker, that reveals more vividly the real function of our nation's largest media corporations than what just happened here. If you're a real journalist, somebody who's devoted to transparency, shining a light on the most powerful government actors when they lie to the American people, and informing the public, you would be celebrating this person who stepped forward and risked his security to show his fellow citizens that the government was lying about this incredibly important war with a nuclear armed power, that we have actual troops deployed on the ground in Ukraine. There's going to be no diplomatic resolution through at least 2023, that Zelensky is planning on using our weapons to strike deep into Russia, which we were told would never happen, risking escalation. He did the job of what journalists claim to do, which is show the public the truth. If you work for the intelligence agencies, you would be furious at this person. You would hate him because he revealed that you just lied. He exposed the truth about what you were doing. What's amazing is the New York Times, the Washington Post, all the people who were at that Pentagon briefing today think the way the CIA and the Pentagon think. They hate this person. It was the New York Times and the Washington Post that did the FBI's work and found the leaker and led the FBI to him. They're demanding that he be punished. They're demanding that the government clamp down and keep things more and more secret. What kind of journalist would ever do that, would want to see a leaker exposed and punished and then demand that the government keep even more secret? But that is what these media corporations are there to do. They love leaks when the CIA and Homeland Security tell them to leak. That's when they disseminate propaganda to the public, like they did during the Trump years when they leaked the transcript between Michael Flynn and Ambassador Kislyak, the most serious kind of leaking crime. The Washington Post did that. Nobody looked for that leaker. Nobody cared. Everybody cheered because it served the interests of the security state. But when it comes to transparency that undermines the agenda of these agencies and that proves to the American people what the truth is, it's amazing that these journalists are on the side of the government and will actually hunt down the leaker and demand that he be punished even more.
I just don't understand how any journalist could collaborate in hiding the fact that we're in a direct hot war with Russia. Maybe you support that, maybe you don't. But how could you hide something that significant, the most significant fact of our generation, from the public? How could you do that?
The only answer is that you don't actually have a journalistic mindset, that you far more identify with your job as working for the government than working for the American people. If you look at the history of the most important journalism stories, it's exactly insiders like Daniel Ellsberg sees that the government is lying to the American people about the war in Vietnam, saying we're winning when in reality privately they're saying we're losing, and he goes and he shows the American people the truth. Or Edward Snowden, who heard James Clapper falsely deny the NSA was spying on American people. He had the evidence in his hand, and he risked his security to show the truth. Same things WikiLeaks did. This is what you celebrate in journalism. Our journalists, meaning the media corporations, hate this because they actually work for their government. That is their true allegiance.
You have to defend truth tellers. You cannot abet lying. If you have an entire country based on lies, it just does not end well. You have to tell the truth, I think. You're certainly a living example of that. Glenn Greenwald, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tucker.
So don't get distracted by the minor things. Look at the big and fundamental things, your food supply. So over the past year, disasters affecting our food supply have become apparently much more common. A number of planes had flown into food processing plants in just the last year in Georgia and Idaho rather. More than a dozen food plants have caught fire, including the headquarters of one of the country's largest organic food distributors. Earlier this year, many farmers reported that their chickens were not laying eggs. Now, in virtually every one of these cases, there's no explanation from the government for what's going on. Now we have another major unexplained disaster affecting our food supply to report. On Monday, a massive explosion at a dairy farm in the Texas Panhandle in Dimmitt, Texas, killed more than 18,000 cows. 18,000. One person was critically injured. Apparently the cows were being brought in for milking when the blast occurred. This is the deadliest barn fire in the history of the state of Texas. It's also the deadliest fire for cattle in the history of the United States. We have no idea what caused this. Authorities are saying they're investigating it. It looks like terrorism. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but maybe someone should explain how it isn't. How is that not terrorism? Maybe it was an accident. Maybe someone should tell us. Well, speaking of food, of course, the latest plan is to get you to stop eating meat entirely. All the cows blew up. Sorry, you have to eat bugs. The latest episode of the new season of Tucker Carlson Originals is a take on the climate activism plan to end global warming by making you eat bugs. And we're calling it Let Them Eat Bugs. It shows how really a propaganda campaign is underway right now to make you think it's totally fine to trade your ribeye for a cockroach. We recommend that very strongly. It's out tomorrow. So there has been a new development in the ongoing case of the large-breasted Canadian shop teacher guy with prosthetic boobs. He has finally been busted without them. We'll tell you what happened. We're on that case. We'll be right back. We've been following the story because we can't resist of the Canadian shop teacher, a dude who's been pulling the kids in his class into his sexual fetish. He showed up in class wearing Z-cup prosthetic breasts. Because Canada is a failed state, the school board took his side, or was on the pervert side in Canada. They placed the teacher on leave only after parents threatened to sue. Most of Canadian media is ignoring this story, but there is one exception. David Menzies of Rebel News has been on this story of the teacher. He uses the name Kayla Lemieux. Menzies just spotted Lemieux at a shopping mall without the fake breasts. Watch this.
Inappropriately in front of children. Can you believe it, folks? Like a cornered rat. He ran for the hills. He didn't even have the guts to come back to his car. He's abandoned it here. He called an Uber and he's skedaddled, well, who knows where. I wanted to get to the bottom of those boobs, if they were real or fake. We have the answer now, don't we, folks? They are fake. They're as fake as a $3 bill.
Mr. Lemieux, where are your breasts? In the history of journalism, has there ever been a better question from a reporter? Probably not. David Menzies of Rebel News joins us tonight. David, thanks so much for coming on. So there was a question about his mental state. I think it's been answered by the fact he's wearing a mask outside. Is that common even in Canada now?
You know what, Tucker? I think that was worn as a disguise mechanism. He put that on when he noticed we were after him. But here's the scoop, Tucker. As you know, several weeks ago, the New York Post had an exclusive interview with Carrie Luke Lemieux, a.k.a. Kayla Lemieux, a.k.a. Busty Lemieux. I know that sounds like a vaudeville performer. But in any event, he dropped a bombshell, Tucker. Those breasts weren't made in China silicone props. Those were actual, real mammary glands. He allegedly started developing at the age of 39 and developed right into a Z cup or a Z cup, as you say in America. And isn't that fascinating? Because this is such a rare medical condition. The Cleveland Clinic knows of about 300 cases. Oh, by the way, they are all biological females that have this case. This is how much of a medical marvel Lemieux is. But here's the thing, Tucker. We saw him without those breasts. So it's one of two things, isn't it? He recently had those breasts amputated, or he was lying. Now, the other thing is, Tucker, for the school board to hear Lemieux say these are real mammary glands, and also that he can't wear a bra because it's too uncomfortable for him, this was like a gift from God to the Halton District School Board woke joke educrats, because for them there was basically the thinking is this, Tucker, we can't do anything about him. It would be like firing a disabled teacher who was in a wheelchair. That would bring in human rights legislation and penalties. So we have to make do with what we have. And by the way, their solution, Tucker, is they tried to do whack-a-mole, putting him in other schools in the region, hoping nobody would notice his breasts. That plan failed miserably. So they're on Plan C now, and that is they're paying him full salary and benefits to stay at home and do nothing. But thankfully, myself and ace cameraman Lincoln J, we caught him. The jig is up, or the jig should be up. The ball is in the Halton District's court. Let's see what they do, Tucker.
David Menzies, one of the last journalists in Canada, the only one covering Breastgate. We appreciate your update tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So Lori Lightfoot is out as mayor of Chicago. We celebrated on the show several weeks ago when she lost in the primary, but unfortunately in her place, Chicago voters have selected a candidate who appears to be worse. Brandon Johnson is his name. He's an open racist, like the mayor he's replacing. He supports defunding the police in one of the most dangerous cities on the continent. Now we're learning that Brandon Johnson is also opposed to educating children. Here he was in 2018 explaining that when he taught students, he didn't like giving homework or bad grades.
What it taught me, though, was pushing, like, to eliminate sort of the standardization of our public schools. My students sometimes would get frustrated. I didn't offer any test prep. Many of my other colleagues were doing it at the time. I was pushing our administration to move away from that. To be quite frank with you, I didn't issue a lot of homework for students. That was my own way of sort of rebelling against the structure. I don't think I ever gave a kid an F. I don't know how a student sits in front of you and fails. I know some professors may find that, this is slightly troubling.
So by not teaching the students, he was, quote, rebelling against the system. They actually tried this in South Africa, and you know what they got? Illiteracy, and then a failed state. Dan Proft is a radio host in the city of Chicago. He joins us tonight. Dan, our apologies on behalf of the rest of the country that your great, truly great city has been taken over by someone who seems even crazier than Lori Lightfoot. Is that right?
Well, it is right. What you have going on in Chicago is slow motion civilizational suicide, and that clip from Brandon Johnson speaks to it. You had historian Victor Davis Hanson on your program last week, and he said the nation is going through a revolution right now, and they don't even know it. Chicago, the corollary, Chicago is going through a funeral right now, and we don't even know it. Right now in the city, fewer than a quarter of Chicago public school students can read or do math at grade level. That's according to state test scores. And yet that's the response from your incoming mayor. That's his vision for education, K through 12 education. This is somebody who touts himself as an educator. He's a representative of the Chicago Teachers Union, which lords over education in the city. Civilizational suicide. You don't teach children how to read and write. You excuse the criminal element among young people. Major crimes are up 46% year over year in Chicago. And Brandon Johnson's response, as you mentioned, and as he touted during the campaign, is to send social workers and EMTs out to respond to 911 calls that involve the possibility of violence. This is somebody who is openly antagonistic toward police. He has touted defund police as a laudable political goal, and you have a city that has decided to throw in with him. Brandon Johnson, his base of support, 29 of the 50 wards he won, those are the wards where crime is the highest. So where people are suffering the most from endemic violent crime, that's who carried Brandon Johnson to victory. I don't know a better commentary on what the situation is in Chicago than that.
Well, he appealed to race hate, and that's what got him elected. He appealed to race hate as openly as any Southern Democrat in the 1950s. So That's just true.
Well,
but appreciate it.
But
so go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say one thing that is important, and you talk about this on your program a lot. It was a racially based election, but you know who really put Brandon Johnson over the top? Was leftist, rich, white women.
Of course. That's the axis right there, Dan Proft. You know, works on happy private equity wives. Yeah, met them. Great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
So there's been a pretty amazing plot twist in the stabbing death of Cash App creator in San Francisco. We got that story completely wrong. Turns out the perpetrator was not a random homeless man. We're going to have the latest update on that sad story next.
The FBI calls it house stealing, the latest scam where a cyber thief transfers the title of your home out of your name and steals your hard-earned equity.
It's roughly 60 to 90 days for that person even figure out that they're the victim of this crime. You start getting foreclosure notices and you realize you've got 4 mortgages on your house that you didn't even know existed.
Unfortunately, it's on you to protect yourself. You might already be a victim. Check your title status now at HomeTitleLock.com.
We have an update on the recent stabbing death of tech executive Bob Lee in San Francisco. We had assumed, and we repeated our assumption to you, and we apologize for that Bob Lee was murdered by a vagrant. Because there's a lot of crime from vagrants in San Francisco. Apparently, that is not true. And again, our apologies. Authorities arrested the suspect today. He was not a vagrant. Fox's Trace Gallagher has the story for us. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, yeah, it turns out the San Francisco police chief was right. This was not a random crime. In fact, local outlets are now saying the victim, 43-year-old Bob Lee, and the suspect, 38-year-old Nima Momeni, knew each other and were actually driving together in a car owned by Momeni when they reportedly got into a dispute, and Momeni allegedly stabbed Bob Lee several times. It's unclear if both men attended the same event on the night of the killing or what prompted the fight, but it appears the suspect may have been overstating his resume and his success. Momeni is listed as owning an IT company in the Bay Area, but his neighbors say the company is just him. And despite saying he graduated from Cal Berkeley, the San Francisco Chronicle says Berkeley has no record of Momeni attending or graduating from Berkeley, and his $1 million condo appears to be a rental. That said, Momeni does not have a violent criminal history. He's been arrested for a few misdemeanors, although one of the arrests was for selling an illegal switchblade knife. Momeni is set to be arraigned tomorrow. Some are saying this should now calm down the reporting of San Francisco being a crime-ridden city, as if being killed by someone you know lowers the rising crime rate and eliminates the concern about countless homeless and drug-addicted residents. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, as always, we are grateful for your reporting. Thank you. So at about 5:30 p.m. on March 25th of this year, a staffer who worked for Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, a man called Philip Todd, was out with a friend getting something to eat in Washington, just a few blocks from the Capitol. And then out of nowhere, a 42-year-old man who had just been released from prison the day before rushed Philip Todd and began stabbing him. In all, Philip Todd was stabbed 4 times. He suffered a punctured lung and a fractured skull. He only survived because his friend, Christopher Barnard, was there, tackled the assailant, and began giving him first aid. Chris Barnard joins us tonight to tell us what happened. Chris Barnard, thank you so much for coming on. A shocking story. Was there any predicate to this? Do you have any idea why this guy attacked your friend?
Well, Tucker, this was certainly one of the scariest moments of my life. I was just walking out of a restaurant with Phil, mere blocks away from the United States Capitol, like you mentioned, in broad daylight, and all of a sudden a looming figure with a hood on just started attacking my friend. And he stabbed him 4 times, like you said, without saying a single word, without making any demands. It was just an act of complete and pure random violence in broad daylight in the middle of D.C.
An act of evil. There's a lot of it, but this is a particularly shocking example. What did you do? How did you respond?
Well, I saw an opening while Phil was grappling with the attacker and kind of instinctively used that opening to tackle the attacker to the ground and managed to get Phil off of him and rush away to safety. I would say it was really more instinct. I didn't really have time to be scared in that moment, but I'm just grateful I was able to get him away from that.
Yeah, well, now you know who you are. And it's a good thing. Were there other people around? Did they help?
It was very busy. Like I said, it was a Saturday afternoon in broad daylight on a very busy street in DC. So there were hundreds of people out that day. I think, like most people in a situation like that, they were shocked to see what was happening, and it all happened so quickly that really people didn't react. They just kind of stood there and looked, and when I got Phil away from the attacker, I was shouting for someone to call 911, for someone to bring something to put on his head, which was gushing with blood, onto the street. And people were just kind of staring, because like you would be in a situation like that, you don't expect to see a stabbing in your capital city in broad daylight.
No, especially not of your friend. There are no words. I appreciate coming on and telling us what happened. Too often we miss the details. Thank you so much, Chris Barnard. So nutrias, however you pronounce it, it's a rodent. They're big. It's an invasive species in the state of Louisiana. But after public outcry, one family has decided to keep its pet nutria, Nudie. Nudie has now become an internet sensation. Obviously, we're not pro-rodent, but if there's a really cute one, we're on his side. We're going to speak to Nudie and his family after the break.
I have it all. Great job, loving wife. But I almost didn't. When I was 28, weeks before my wedding, I couldn't speak or swallow. Lucky for me, I was rushed to New York Presbyterian. Tests found a torn artery. I'd had a stroke. They immediately gave me TPA, a medication to dissolve the blood clot. Dr. Yason and the team's fast response was the difference between losing everything and having it all.
Last night we told you the side-splitting story of Justin Pearson. He's the supposedly oppressed Tennessee lawmaker who started imitating Martin Luther King after spending 4 years at Bowdoin College, the whitest school in the whitest state, place that for some reason cost $60,000 a year. Pearson was recently expelled from the Tennessee State House for leading an insurrection. He was later reinstated because insurrection's not a big deal if you're a Democrat. Now we're learning much more about one of his fellow insurrectionists, Tennessee State Representative Justin Jones. Like Pearson, Justin Jones is a product of privilege. He's from the Bay Area originally. He went to Vanderbilt Divinity School. Can you even imagine what happens at Vanderbilt Divinity School? Nothing good. Justin Jones was also temporarily kicked out of the State House for his role in the insurrection, but it turns out insurrecting is not the only crime that he has committed. During a May 2020 BLM riot, Justin Jones walked on top of a marked police car and blocked traffic along with dozens of others. His fellow rioters then smashed the police car's windows and spray painted it. Jones was charged with a crime before a district attorney called Glenn Funk, who unfortunately was a Democrat, so he dropped the charges because no big deal to walk on a police car when you're a fellow BLM rioter. So the message here is very, very clear. Justice is not blind. There are two systems. If you're with the people in charge, you can literally do whatever you want. You can walk on a police car. You can surround cars in the middle of the street and destroy them. You can even point guns at people, and you're not going to be charged. You'll be celebrated as a hero by regime media. You get to go on Good Morning America. But if you dare to try to defend yourself from the violent mob surrounding your car, like Daniel Perry did in Austin, Texas, we're going to send you to prison. So 3 years ago, a man called Denny Lacoste was driving near New Orleans when he came across a tiny nutria on the side of the road. The rodent siblings had just been hit by a car, unfortunately, so Denny Lacoste jumped into action, scooped up the little guy, and rescued him. He gave the animal the name Nudie and raised him as a pet. Nudie is a local celebrity, not surprisingly. He's also a regular at Denny Lacoste's seafood restaurant, Dennis Seafood, in Metairie, Louisiana. So recently, the state of Louisiana, because they've solved all other problems, tried to seize Nudie, the pet nutria, on public health grounds. But Denny Lacoste and his brave wife, Myra, stood up to the government, and now they've gotten word, yes, the man will let them keep the rodent. Dennis and Myra Lacoste join us now, along with Nudie. Mr. and Mrs. Lacoste, I appreciate your coming on tonight. I'm glad to meet Nudie, and I just want to thank you on behalf of all animal lovers for your bravery in the face of state interference. Why was it so important for you to keep this pet?
It
was just a little hurt animal. We felt sorry for her.
Yeah.
He was so cute. He fit in the palm of my hand, and he was very fluffy.
Well, he looks like he still is. So Nutria, I'm embarrassed. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. Is it Nutria or Nutria?
Nutria.
Nutria.
You're saying it right.
We'll take a middle ground. They're rodents, but when you get close to them, they're incredibly cute. Why is the state against them?
They cause a lot of damage to the wetlands.
Yeah.
They destroy our local canals too.
Yeah, well, I did know that. But he's in your living room, so it doesn't seem like he's a threat to your waterways in Louisiana. What do you feed him?
Oh, no, he's sweet potatoes, corn on the cob, Popeye's chicken, pancakes.
A lot of fruit.
I've got a similar diet, actually. Yeah. I'm not even a rodent. What? How does he eat fried chicken?
He likes milk bones.
Right now, he's eating a crawfish claw. A boiled crawfish claw.
He loves boiled crawfish.
If he lucked
One of
out
his
getting
favorite
adopted,
snacks.
I mean, so he was literally adopted by people who have a famous restaurant. So that's pretty good. If you're a stranded orphaned rodent, that's a pretty good stroke of luck.
Yeah, right.
Right? Yes, he is a lucky one. He has it made.
Are there? I want to ask you to be honest for 1 second. Are there any downsides to adopting an enormous rodent?
Yeah, he's a lot of work.
Yeah.
He's a lot of work. He kind of listens like a cat, not too good.
Too good. Can you be more specific? Because I have the feeling a lot of our viewers are going to run out and try to adopt a nutria. What would you caution them?
Don't go get a nutria. No.
They can destroy your inside of your house really quickly.
Besides eating pancakes and stuff like that, he loves wires.
He loves wires?
Sofa wires. Yeah, any kind of wires.
Yes.
Phone charges, you got to pick all that up. I don't know why he loves wires.
Wow. Well, you were giving other than that. Does he sleep at all?
Woodwork. Oh, he sleeps all night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He'll take a towel and go into the hall bathroom and make a nest. And he'll walk around the house and grab all the dog toys and shoes, hats, whatever is on the floor. And he'll go into the hall bathroom. And once he goes into the bathroom, he's done for the night.
Oh, yeah. He's not nocturnal. He got trained on our schedule.
Yeah.
But that's the spirit. You got to make the rodents obey. I agree with that. Dennis Lacoste, thank you so much. Nudie, great to meet you. Appreciate your coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Same here.
Thank you, Tucker.
Thank you. So, Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm doesn't actually know anything about energy, never really had a real job. But she does wear a hard hat, which suggests she's impressive. We'll show you the video, which will make your night straight ahead. So the same people who can't get the planes to take off and land on time, who think the roads are racist, have now declared themselves energy experts. They understand the grid. And because they understand a lot about energy, the Biden administration is trying to tell you need an electric car. Now, you may not be able to afford one. You may be able to charge it because they can't actually run the power grid, because when it's not windy, the power grid doesn't work. But you need to do it anyway, because if you do it, you can control the weather. Joe Biden's Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, believes all of this. Nothing to do at all with the fact she was an investor in companies that make electric cars, even after she became Energy Secretary. So it's not a scam, so rest easy. But if you're still skeptical that Jennifer Granholm is a very serious person who knows a lot about infrastructure and building things, watch this. Here she is, along with Stephanie Rule, her soul sister at MSNBC, proving that they're experts because they dress like experts. Watch this.
The better choice is to move to electrified transportation because it is so much cheaper for you to operate an electric vehicle than it is to fill up your tank with gasoline. So the bottom line is moving to clean is moving to energy security and moving to affordability.
Energy security! We're in charge! Rest easy. But they're wearing hard hats and safety glasses. No, those are not Halloween costumes. They're a message to you, the viewer. And the message is this. These people are not overpaid buffoons with pointless college degrees but no actual skills. No, they're not. They're seasoned manufacturing experts who are going to build this country a brand new energy grid that's so brilliantly innovative, it will literally change the weather. That's what they're telling us. Okay, and we're going to buy it. But first, one of these ladies is going to have to change the oil in our truck, just so we can be sure they know what they're doing. Good luck with that. So there's some uncertainty about the future of the American economy. The Fed is now predicting a recession later this year. One of the people who's given a lot of thought about how you can deal with this and how we should reshape the American economy to stop shafting people at the bottom is Orrin Cass. He's executive director of American Compass. We spoke to him at length for a new episode of Tucker Carlson Today. Here is part of it.
So what we want to do is to bring back an economic consensus, a sort of way of thinking about the economy that emphasizes the importance of family, community, and industry to our liberty and prosperity. And to say that instead of thinking about everything in terms of GDP and consumption, and as long as we get more growth, as long as we have more stuff, we're doing well, instead recognize that those social institutions, that's actually where our prosperity and our liberty ultimately comes from.
Take the weirdness and just turn it down like 3 clicks. Orrin Cass, very smart man. You can find that online right now at Fox Nation. We're going to have an exclusive look on this show tomorrow night of our brand new season of Tucker Carlson Originals, beginning with our brand new documentary, Let Them Eat Bugs, right here on Fox News. You can stream it immediately after. That is it for us. 10 seconds late. Our apologies to Sean Hannity and his friends who take over.
It's actually 15 seconds late, but who's counting among friends, you know? By the way, I have a great group of people. What did you want to say? Hey, there you go.
You throw the best parties, Sean.
You throw a good party. Anyway, Tucker, thank you. Have a great night. Welcome to Hannity. Yes, we are back with a live audience. Welcome all of you. Thank you for being here.
The FBI arresting 21-year-old Jack Douglas Teixeira following the leaks online of classified documents that frankly embarrassed Washington with its allies around the world. The 21-year-old member of the U.S. Air National Guard was apprehended near his home about 50 miles west of Boston. Now, the leak of documents posted largely on social media sites was believed to be the most serious security breach since the WikiLeaks scandal of 2010. The newest leaks revealing that the war in Ukraine is going badly for the Ukrainians, that the U.S. spies on several allies, and that several other U.S. allies not only spy on us, but they partner with the Russians in various ways, and in some cases, evenly actively work against American and UK interests, is by getting over $1 billion a year in aid from the U.S. Teixeira, for his part, faces years behind bars for these leaks, but what's getting far less attention is the fact that the Washington Post and the New York Times actually helped the FBI find the alleged leaker. The very same FBI, which has yet to identify the Dobbs decision leaker from the Supreme Court or release the manifesto of the transgender shooter after the Nashville shootings.
Of Bud Light beer with a semi-automatic rifle. In case you missed this week's right-wing culture war, conservatives are freaking out that Bud Light sponsored an ad featuring transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney. Amazingly, and kind of impossibly, it gets worse.
America's been drinking beer from a company that doesn't even know which restroom to use. That's why I created Conservative Dad's ultra-right, 100% woke-free beer. Stop giving money to woke corporations that hate our values.
Yeah, totally. Don't you hate when there's woke in your beer? For now, just $20 plus shipping and handling, you can own the libs with a sixer of woke-free beer. And the thing is, this is everything now. You can buy $6 bars of woke-free chocolate, or you can pay extra for conservative cell phone service. It's really just repackaged regular cell phone service from carriers like T-Mobile, just to own the libs. Conservatives are creating their own little conservative world for themselves. And it's funny, or sort of sad funny, when it's stuff like beer and chocolate and it's clearly all just a big hustle, but it does not stop there. Because red states are now creating a very different America. Today, Florida's legislature passed a ban on most abortions after 6 weeks. Governor DeSantis has already said he will sign that into law, despite the fact that polls show 75% of Florida residents and even 61% of Florida Republicans oppose a 6-week ban. That will bring the tally to 13 states with full abortion bans, plus Georgia and Florida with their 6-week bans. That's despite the fact that 6 in 10 Americans believe abortion should be legal in most cases. In this year's legislative session, 14 Republican-controlled states have passed some form of anti-LGBTQ rights law. It all means that your lived experience as an American, what kind of civil rights you have, now basically depends on who runs your state. In Tennessee today, State Representative Justin Pearson was sworn back into the state legislature after Pearson and another Black Democrat were expelled by the Republican-controlled House for speaking out for gun safety reform. Republicans basically took away the representation of 130,000 Tennesseans because they didn't like that they were protesting for reforms after a mass shooting. After the civil rights gains of the 1960s and 70s and the social progress of the first part of this millennium, Republicans are taking it upon themselves to use any means necessary, whether democratic or not, to reverse course. Joining us now is Al Franken, former senator from Minnesota, fresh off hosting The Daily Show and hosting the Al Franken podcast. Senator Franken, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here tonight.
Great to be here.
So I'll just ask you, do you like woke or woke-free beer?
Both. It depends which is hoppier.
Yeah. Which one is...
This is so stupid. And those things will last a day or so or a couple days. But what amazes me are these states that are passing these 6-week laws, like in Florida, etc. And the people don't want it there. And what was interesting is before Dobbs, this was a one-party issue. This was the Republicans' issue.
They would vote on it.
They would vote on it. These are one-issue people. Now, after Dobbs, there are a lot of one-issue people the other way.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe more. And they include Republicans, as you were saying, but also a lot of Democratic young people, and women and men, and that's going to be their one issue. And in some cases, it'll be a lot of people's issue.
Yeah.
It'll just be an issue.
Well, it clearly, I mean, it's changing the reality of off-year elections and midterm elections, right? The Dobbs has electrified the American public.
But if you think about the next election, is not an off-year election.
No.
You're electing senators, and you're electing presidents, so you're electing judges.
Yeah.
And if you're electing federal judges, this doesn't play well in Michigan. It doesn't play well in Wisconsin, as we saw in the Supreme Court vote there. It doesn't play well in Minnesota. It doesn't play well in Pennsylvania. This is re-erecting the blue wall.
Yeah, but I get that, right? You're seeing the tangible results of this position that Republicans have staked out for themselves, but it's not dimmed their enthusiasm. I mean, that I think is what's so confounding, right? It's really clear that abortion is a terrible issue for Republicans because they're at odds with the American public. And yet today, Ron DeSantis, who has aspirations...
He wants the nomination.
They keep doing it. And the reality is, there's the political question, there's also the human question. There are people who need access to reproductive choice all over this country who aren't going to get it. There may be people who die in the course of illegal abortions, right?
He wants the nomination. He doesn't care
about actually winning.
No, he doesn't care about people.
This conversation isn't
Is it surprising? There was a day and age when Republicans would look and say, okay, we got to dial it back on this. They are full steam ahead on this instead. And to me, it seems like it coincides with an increasingly aggressive Republican Party that is ready to employ any tactic it wants just to own the libs, cement party power, and sort of stake its